Anna, you are Jewish or Christian?
I don't know. I'm trying to find my family. My family is part Christian, part Catholic, and part Jewish. My father was Jewish. My father is from Białystok. My father never ever talked about his life before the war, except to say that he came from a very big family, warm, loving. He was very proud of them. They were educated people. Many of them were teachers. His parents were weavers, as far as I know, so his family was involved in textiles. But whenever I asked him, even tell me the name of my grandparents, or when my children would ask, he would never tell us anything. He would always say, you would never understand. And so we didn't. We didn't understand. And we looked for answers everywhere, and that's really what I'm doing here. I'm coming here to see if I can find some answers. Who is this man who was my father? What is something about his family that I can know? I know the names, but the names I only know recently. I never knew the names until 2 years ago. 2 years ago we went to Israel and we knew we were going, so I hassled my mother to please tell me who my relatives in Israel were, because she wouldn't tell me. It took me 6 months to get the addresses. I wrote to a gentleman called Yoram, who's my father's cousin, I discovered. And he wrote back to me, and my letter was, Yoram, who are you? How are you related to me? And Yoram organised the day that we were in Israel on this cruise, that the family got together. And I met people from 3 different lines of my father's family. And Yoram brought a small family tree. And for the first time, I had some ideas. Before that, I knew nothing at all. Of the people who lived in Białystok during the war, no one survived. The only people who survived of the family were those people who left. There were some people in Israel who left in the 20s. There was my father, who went to Moscow to go to university, and he survived because he wasn't here. And there was an uncle in Australia who survived, and everybody else, as far as I know, died during the war. My grandfather was Stefan Gavron. He fought in the First World War as part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He then fought for Pilsudski. Poland protected the rest of the world. And later, when the Second World War started, he was drafted back into logistics. He was based in Brest-Litovsk, and he was captured the day after the Russians moved in, and he was taken, and eventually he was murdered in Katyn. As a result, my grandmother and the rest of my mother, my aunt, my uncle were taken to Stepanyak, which is near Novosibirsk, and they spent the next few years in Siberia. They were supposed to build a collective farm. They were released from there. My mother and my aunt were able to leave because Stalin needed a new army, and so he took people out of the gulags and the prisons and the exile villages, and he allowed them to form a Polish division of the Russian army. When my parents were in the army, the Polish division of the Russian army under Zhukov, and they were right next to the Wisła, and my mother and father could see as the AK was rising and the Germans started to destroy Warsaw. My father managed to take a platoon, or whatever the right language is, with him. They crossed the river and they formed a bridgehead with the AK, and he in fact was desperate to join with the AK and to join his forces with them so they could protect the AK and Warsaw. The Russian army wouldn't supply them. So my father lost over 700 men, and he had to come back across the bridges. In fact, some of the soldiers of his army died. They crossed the bridge by boat, and in fact the Russians fired on them because they didn't want them to come back. They wanted that to be a failure. And my father always knew you could never trust the Russians after that. My father got the Virtuti Militari. He was a major and he had forces under him, and he was able to send his forces out to capture Germans and question them and get intelligence. But he didn't do that. He in fact went himself. And so for 4 or 5 days in a row, he crossed the lines, he captured German soldiers and brought them back, and they were questioned by the Russian army. And for that, later on, he was awarded the Virtuti Militari. In fact, I have a photo of my parents in front of the Brandenburg Gate. After the war, my father came looking, and he never found a single soul. I was born in Kielce. My mother's Catholic. My parents met in the army, and I think that under ordinary circumstances they would have probably never married, but they met in the army. They married before a big battle. I don't think my father expected to survive. My parents made a decision to come to Australia. We were brought up as Catholics. My father made an agreement with my mother that we'd be brought up as Catholics, and when I was 7 in Australia, I did my first Holy Communion, and after that I never really attended church, and I had some Jewish friends and I wanted to go to Jewish dance classes with them, but my father wouldn't let me because he didn't want me to identify in any way as Jewish. So it was a very strange upbringing. All the family friends were Jewish. We lived in a totally Jewish circle. We celebrated Passover, but also we celebrated Easter. We celebrated Christmas and we celebrated Hanukkah. The Jewish roots is my cultural heritage. I grew up in a Jewish community, but my husband is Protestant, yes. I went to a Protestant school. I went to a Methodist school.
Anna, you are Jewish or Christian?
I don't know. The Jews don't accept me as Jewish. I don't know. My sister converted to marry a Jewish man. I would have to convert. I don't feel like converting, but my cultural heritage is all Jewish. We had no Catholic family friends. You know, I'm 66 years old and I'm not sure of my grandmother's name. I want to find my father's birth certificate. I want to find her name. I want to record that in Yad Vashem. I came to find my father. My father, Taylor Murkies, visited Białystok and in fact gave a presentation. There was a conference, 500 years of Jewry in the Podlasie, and he in fact spoke at that, but he was very, very proud to come and speak here.